I am Hercule Poirot. Welcome to my new mystery story.
A fanciful notion, and a foolish one, yet those words, breathed by a trembling woman in Arctic fox fur as the emergency lighting flickered back to life, seemed to hang in the crystalline air of the Aurora Pavilion like smoke from an extinguished candle. We stood, a collection of the wealthy, the celebrated, and the curious, beneath the great glass dome that crowned the ridge above the Norwegian fjord, watching curtains of emerald and violet fire dance across the black polar sky. Snow whispered against the windows in dry, urgent taps. Far below, the forest stretched like dark velvet, stitched with the silver thread of a single road, now impassable, buried beneath the storm that had descended from the Arctic Sea. I had never witnessed the aurora borealis before arriving at this remote sanctuary. The lights possessed an otherworldly majesty that my military years had not prepared me to comprehend. Solemn, hypnotic, and, if I may venture the observation, faintly menacing in their silent grandeur. Beside me, Hercule Poirot appeared as incongruous as a perfectly pressed orchid in a wilderness of ice, his immaculate patent leather shoes and precisely waxed moustache a testament to civilization's stubborn refusal to yield to nature's chaos. "They pretend to disorder, these lights," he observed, his keen eyes following the celestial ballet above us. "But observe, mon ami Hastings. There is rhythm, there is pattern. The universe, she does not perform without purpose." "Nature has certainly made an effort tonight," I replied, rubbing my hands against the bitter cold that seemed to seep through the pavilion's heated walls. "I only wish she would extend the same courtesy to warmth." Poirot's gaze dropped with evident disapproval to a single snowflake that had had the audacity to expire upon his sleeve. With two delicate fingers, he brushed it away, adjusting his cuffs as if to rebuke the Arctic itself for its presumption. "We endure, Hastings, for the sake of beauty. It is a thing the English do with particular grace." We had been invited to witness the inauguration of the Aurora Pavilion by Sir Alistair Rendell himself, an industrialist of the modern philanthropic breed who had discovered his social conscience late in life and, as such, advertised it with the fervor of a convert. He had purchased this remote ridge and its magnificent glass-domed observatory, transforming the lodge below into a temple of Scandinavian luxury, all in service of his newly established foundation dedicated to preserving the fragile dance of the aurora borealis in our changing world. The guests assembled that evening numbered perhaps 20 souls, though I shall focus upon those who would soon form the intimate circle within which death would place his cold hand. Sir Alistair himself commanded attention effortlessly, tall, distinguished, with silver hair and the bearing of a man accustomed to deference. He wore success like a well-tailored coat, though I noticed his smile possessed a quality that never quite reached his pale blue eyes. At his side stood Lady Viola Rendell, his second wife, a striking woman of perhaps 35, with raven hair arranged in an artfully careless chignon that spoke of considerable expense and effort. She observed more than she spoke, her dark eyes missing little. Dr. Lena Koronen, the Finnish astrophysicist who directed the pavilion's research, possessed the restless energy of those who must constantly guard their domain from well-meaning but ignorant interference. Her capable hands moved protectively toward the control panels whenever guests wandered too near, rescuing delicate instruments with patient firmness. Magnus Holm, the Norwegian lodge manager, carried authority and silence in equal measure, his weathered face carved from the same granite as the surrounding peaks. Annika Sørensen, Sir Alistair's personal secretary, explained the evening's proceedings with mechanical precision, her neat appearance and measured words revealing nothing of her inner thoughts. Among the other notable guests were Elspeth Gray, the sharp-tongued London society columnist whose pen had ruined more reputations than bankruptcy; Tom March, an American entrepreneur whose loud laugh and louder opinions had built and destroyed 3 companies; Yves Dufour, the celebrated French photographer who moved through the gathering like smoke made flesh, and Olga Markova, the retired prima ballerina whose every gesture remained a performance decades after her final curtain call. The ceremony itself was elegantly simple. Sir Alistair would address the gathering, Dr. Coronen would open the pavilion's great mechanical petals to reveal the aurora in all its glory, and then the evening's pièce de résistance, the unveiling of Sir Alistair's most generous donation. The legendary verdelet, a collar of Colombian emeralds that had belonged to Lady Viola's family for generations, now to be permanently displayed as a terrestrial echo of the celestial lights. Sir Alistair mounted the modest wooden dais, his voice carrying easily through the hushed assembly as he spoke of responsibility, legacy, and the obligation of great wealth to serve great purposes. When he turned to the shrouded display case containing the emeralds, his smile toward his wife held an edge I could not quite decipher. "The verdelet," he announced, "carries a history as turbulent as its beauty is undeniable. Tonight it becomes part of something larger than private possession, a beacon that will blaze beneath the stars as if the earth itself had grown its own aurora." He nodded to Annika, who stepped forward to remove the velvet drape. The emeralds blazed forth like captured starlight, each stone deep enough to drown a conscience, their vulgar magnificence drawing gasps from the assembled guests. It was then that Dr. Coronen, perhaps eager to redirect attention from human ceremony to celestial wonder, activated the dome's opening mechanism. The great panels slid apart with mechanical precision, and the aurora bloomed above us in all its terrible beauty. The pavilion's lights chose that moment to flicker, once, twice, then died completely, plunging us into a darkness broken only by the ghostly radiance of the aurora itself. Someone laughed nervously. Another voice called out reassurance about emergency systems. But then came a sound that silenced all conversation, a heavy thud, followed by the peculiar stillness that accompanies tragedy. When the emergency lighting hummed to life moments later, we found Sir Alistair Rendell crumpled at the base of the dais, his distinguished head turned at an angle that made something within me recoil. His hand lay outstretched, palm upward, as if making a final, futile appeal to the indifferent stars above. Lady Viola stood frozen a few paces away, her hands half raised in a gesture that seemed to hover between reaching out and pulling back. Dr. Coronen's face had gone ashen, while Annika Sorensen moved instinctively toward the body before Magnus Holm's authoritative voice stopped her. "Please, everyone remain where you are," the lodge manager commanded, his calm Norwegian accent cutting through the rising murmur of shock and confusion. Poirot had moved forward with characteristic precision, his small, neat figure approaching the fallen industrialist with the careful attention of a jeweler examining a precious stone. He did not kneel immediately, but stood observing, his head tilted at that familiar angle that indicated the engagement of his legendary little grey cells. "Magnus," he said quietly, "might I trouble you for a flashlight that does not flicker?" "Merci." "Hastings, if you would stand to my left, s'il vous plaît." With the grace of a dancer, Poirot descended to one knee beside the body, his examination thorough yet respectful. Without disturbing the scene, he studied the position of the limbs, the condition of the clothing, the angle of the head. His keen eyes noted details that escaped the rest of us, his trained mind already beginning to separate the significant from the merely dramatic. "Is he?" Lady Viola's voice was steady but thin, like crystal under strain. "Hélas, madame, Sir Alistair is beyond our assistance," Poirot replied gently, rising to his feet with the same fluid grace. His eyes swept the circle of shocked faces, noting reactions, cataloguing expressions, filing away the small revelations that shock tends to produce. "The lights failed," Tom March offered, his American confidence somewhat shaken. He must have fallen from the platform when the darkness came. From such a modest height, Elspeth Gray's journalistic instincts had already reasserted themselves. One would think a man of Sir Alister's stature would require a more substantial precipice for such a dramatic exit. Captain Lansing, the pilot who had transported several guests to this remote location, appeared at the pavilion's entrance with snow dusting his shoulders like Arctic epaulets. "The road is completely blocked," he announced grimly. "The pass is closed, and this storm will ground any aircraft for at least 24 hours. We are, I'm afraid, thoroughly isolated." "Then we find ourselves," observed Reverend Vale with unsettling equanimity, "a rather exclusive ark." Poirot's attention had been caught by something near the emerald display case. Annika had quietly replaced the velvet drape over the verre de lait, her usual composure finally showing cracks. His eyes lingered on this small action before moving on, filing the observation away with characteristic thoroughness. "Magnus home?" Poirot said with quiet authority. "I must ask that you secure all entrances to this pavilion. No one enters or leaves until the proper authorities can be contacted. Captain Lansing, you will attempt communication with the outside world. Dr. Koronen, please preserve all settings and controls exactly as they were at the moment of this unfortunate incident." "You speak as if this were something more than a tragic accident," Elspeth observed, her reporter's instincts fully engaged. Poirot straightened his tie with meticulous care, his pale eyes reflecting the aurora's ethereal glow. "Madame, I have observed that accidents, they are seldom so convenient in their timing. The darkness that came at precisely the moment of Sir Alister's fall, the isolation that prevents both escape and investigation, the gathering of individuals each with their own relationship to the deceased. None. This bears the hallmarks of careful planning." A collective intake of breath greeted this pronouncement. Lady Viola's composure finally cracked, producing a sound that contained neither grief nor relief, but rather a surprise that seemed almost expected. "You mean to suggest—" Reverend Vale began, then stopped, perhaps recognizing that certain words should not be spoken first by a man of the cloth. "I suggest nothing yet," Poirot replied with characteristic precision. "I observe. I collect the facts. I arrange them in their proper order." His gaze moved slowly around the circle of faces, some pale, others flushed, all bearing the particular tension that accompanies the presence of hidden guilt. "You will forgive the inconvenience, but I must insist that you all remain together. The storm has provided us with an intimacy none of us planned." Outside, the aurora continued its ancient dance, indifferent to the human drama unfolding beneath its ethereal light. The whisper began again, stubborn as gossip and twice as persistent. The northern lights had claimed Sir Alister Rondel, but Poirot's eyes held that familiar spark of intellectual engagement. Not pleasure, never that when death was involved, but the sharp focus of a mind that had found its proper challenge. "Hastings," he murmured, adjusting an invisible speck of dust from his immaculate sleeve. "Observe the small details, mon ami. The large ones, they are often merely the magician's flourish, designed to distract from the real trick." The shadows beneath the northern lights had indeed claimed a victim, but Hercule Poirot's methodical brilliance would soon illuminate the very human darkness that had orchestrated this celestial murder. The immediate aftermath settled into the peculiar quiet that follows sudden death, broken only by the whisper of snow against glass and the low hum of emergency lighting. Magnus Holm moved with practiced efficiency, dispatching 2 lodge staff members to secure both the main entrance and the passage leading to the technical chambers. Captain Lansing retreated to attempt communication with the outside world, though the storm's fury rendered such efforts futile for the present. The remaining guests found themselves arranged in an unconscious semicircle around the tragedy, expensive winter clothing and barely concealed anxiety creating a tableau of wealth confronted by mortality. Poirot surveyed this human landscape with the methodical attention of a botanist cataloguing specimens. His pale eyes moved from face to face, noting the subtle shifts in posture, the instinctive clustering of certain individuals, the way hands moved toward pockets or away from accusatory gestures. I observed him absorbing these details with characteristic precision, filing away each observation for later analysis. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his accented English carrying quiet authority, "I must ask for your patience while we await the proper authorities. In the meantime, perhaps you would indulge me in establishing the sequence of events. Nothing formal, you understand, merely an attempt to preserve memory before time allows her to redecorate the facts." Lady Viola had composed herself with admirable speed, though her gloved hands remained tightly clasped. "Surely this is a matter for the police, Monsieur Poirot. We are all grieving Sir Alistair's loss." "But of course, madame. Yet grief does not erase memory, and memory is most reliable when captured quickly." Poirot's smile held sympathy without yielding authority. "I shall require each of you to tell me precisely where you stood when the lights failed and what you observed in those crucial moments." The systematic questioning that followed revealed a careful choreography of positions. Lady Viola had been near the base of the dais, close enough to hear her husband call out before his fall. Dr. Corhanen had been at her control console, attempting to restore power when the backup systems failed to engage. Magnus had positioned himself near the service entrance, while Annika Sorensen stood mere paces from Sir Alistair, the velvet drape for the emerald display in her hands. "You replaced the covering immediately after the tragedy," Poirot observed, his attention drawn to the shrouded display case. An admirable concern for propriety, though curious in its timing. Annika flushed slightly. "It seemed improper to leave the Verdelet exposed with the lights failing. I did not wish anyone to—" Her glance slid toward Tom March, who grinned with wounded innocence. "The case locks automatically," Dr. Corhanen interjected, her scientific precision asserting itself. "Though during the power failure, the security panel would have been inactive for several seconds." "Several seconds," Poirot repeated thoughtfully. "Sufficient time for hands that knew their purpose to accomplish much or nothing, as character dictates." He bent to examine the display case at an angle. "Hastings, observe the faint mark there upon the glass. The warmth of breath leaves its ghost, no?" Dr. Corhanen bristled at the implication regarding her systems. The backup generators should have engaged instantly. They did not. Someone may have interfered with the manual override, though the access logs will reveal any tampering. "And who possesses such access?" Poirot inquired with deceptive mildness. "Magnus, Annika, Sir Alistair himself, and—" She paused. "Myself, naturally." Tom March's nervous laugh cut through the tension. "Come now, Doctor. Equipment fails, especially in these conditions. You can't seriously suggest someone sabotaged a power grid to push a man off a 3-foot platform." 3 feet, 4 inches, Poirot corrected with precision that made several guests blink. "Sufficient height to cause serious injury, particularly for a gentleman of Sir Alistair's years." "Sir Alistair was in excellent health," Annika offered with professional neutrality. "He recently passed a comprehensive medical examination for insurance purposes. His physician remarked on his exceptional cardiovascular condition. Then we may eliminate natural causes from our considerations. Most helpful." Poirot's gaze moved to Yves Dufour, whose camera hung protectively around his neck. "Your equipment captured the evening's events?" "Until the power failed. The aurora provided insufficient illumination for further photography." Reverend Vale cleared his throat with clerical authority. "Surely we allow our imaginations to run toward unnecessarily dark conclusions. Sir Alistair suffered an unfortunate accident in poor lighting conditions." "Perhaps," Poirot agreed. "Yet I find myself troubled by the convergence of circumstances, the dome opening, the power failure, the fall, all occurring at the precise moment of maximum theatrical effect. Fate herself would blush at such dramatic excess." Magnus Holmes' weathered features showed their first crack in professional composure. The dome's mechanism operates on a separate circuit. There should have been no connection between the systems. Should have been, you say, but there was in fact such a connection. The question hung in the air like smoke, transforming the gathering from witnesses into suspects. Outside, the aurora continued its ancient dance, beautiful and indifferent to the human drama unfolding beneath its ethereal light. "I shall require a private space," Poirot announced, "where I may speak with each of you individually. We must avoid the contamination of memory through shared narratives." The luxury of the pavilion had become a gilded cage, and somewhere within this circle of wealth and privilege lurked a killer whose careful planning had orchestrated murder beneath the northern lights. Magnus Holm arranged a smaller chamber adjacent to the main pavilion, a cozy alcove furnished with Norwegian pine and leather that provided the necessary privacy for confidential discourse. The aurora's ethereal glow filtered through the curved glass, casting shifting shadows across the wooden walls as Poirot positioned himself with characteristic precision, ensuring clear sight lines while maintaining an atmosphere of intimate conversation rather than formal interrogation. "We shall begin with Lady Viola," he announced, his tone carrying gentle authority. "The widow's perspective often illuminates corners that others cannot see." Lady Viola entered with measured grace, her black dress rustling softly against the silence. She settled into the chair across from Poirot with practiced elegance, though I noticed her gloved hands remained tightly clasped, the knuckles showing white beneath the fine leather. "Madame, you have my deepest sympathies," Poirot began, his voice carrying genuine warmth. "The loss of a husband is profound, regardless of circumstances. Tell me, if you would, of your marriage to Sir Alistair." 3 years this October. We met at a charity gala in London." Her response came measured, controlled. "Alistair was recently widowed, and I was between circumstances, you might say." "Between circumstances" suggests delicacy. "Your family's financial position, perhaps?" A flush crept across Lady Viola's pale cheeks. "After my father's death, yes, our situation became strained. The Verdelais was all that remained of our former prosperity." "Ah, the emeralds. Yet tonight you agreed to their permanent donation, a generous sacrifice." Lady Viola's hesitation lasted only a heartbeat, but Poirot caught it like a hawk spotting movement. It was Alistair's vision entirely. He felt they would serve a greater purpose here than locked away in London. "And you agreed willingly. What use are jewels if they bring no joy?" The words carried a note I could not quite identify. Resignation, perhaps, or relief. Poirot nodded thoughtfully. "Your position when the lights failed? You were quite close to your husband." "Yes, perhaps 10 feet away." I heard him call out, a sound of surprise rather than pain. Then came that terrible thud. She shuddered delicately. In the darkness, I moved toward the sound, but Magnus called for everyone to remain still. After Lady Viola's departure, Poirot summoned Dr. Coronen, who entered with the brisk efficiency of one accustomed to explaining complex matters to less scientifically inclined audiences. Her auburn hair caught the aurora's glow as she settled into the chair, her capable hands folded with professional composure. "Doctor, your expertise makes you invaluable in understanding tonight's events. The power failure. You mentioned possible tampering." "The primary generators should have maintained power throughout the dome sequence. The backup systems are designed to engage within 3 seconds. Neither functioned properly." Her frustration was evident. "Someone with technical knowledge could have introduced a delay circuit, but it would require access to the main electrical panel." "And who possesses such access?" "The 4 individuals I mentioned previously, plus maintenance staff at the lodge below. The installation team departed weeks ago." Poirot leaned forward slightly. "You have worked with Sir Alistair for how long?" 18 months. He recruited me from Helsinki after my aurora prediction research gained international attention." "Yet you seem less than devastated by his death." Dr. Coronen's jaw tightened. "I respected Sir Alistair's vision, but not his methods. He treated scientific research as another business acquisition, something to be managed rather than understood. Had this created difficulties? Recently, yes. He wanted to commercialize our findings, create tourism packages, perhaps attempt weather modification experiments. Such ventures would compromise our work's integrity. When Dr. Koronen departed, Annika Sørensen entered with her characteristic precision, carrying a small leather notebook that spoke to her meticulous nature. "Mademoiselle, you have served Sir Alistair for how long?" 5 years, 6 months, she replied without hesitation. "Since the Foundation's inception." "You would know his affairs intimately." "I managed his schedule, correspondence, and administrative duties. His personal life remained his own." Poirot's eyes lingered on her hands. "The Vert de Lait display. You covered it immediately after the incident. Was there a particular reason?" "It was valuable, and with emergency lighting I feared opportunistic individuals might take advantage of the confusion." Her eyes hardened slightly, a glimpse of something less composed beneath the professional facade. "And you possess access to the electrical systems?" "Yes, for security coordination purposes, though I was nowhere near the control panel when the failure occurred." As Annika departed, Poirot turned to me with that familiar expression of concentrated thought. "Observe, Hastings, how each person reveals not merely facts, but the architecture of their character. Already the pattern begins to emerge, a man who made enemies as easily as money." The aurora pulsed overhead like a vast heartbeat, and I found myself wondering whether Poirot's methodical questioning would illuminate the human darkness that had orchestrated this celestial murder. Magnus Holm entered the alcove with the measured tread of a man accustomed to bearing responsibility, his weathered features carrying the weight of unwelcome revelations. He settled into the chair with deliberate precision, his pale blue eyes meeting Poirot's gaze with the directness of one who had spent decades managing both property and people. "Magnus, you have overseen this establishment since its conception," Poirot began, his tone carrying respectful acknowledgement of the man's expertise. "The power failure tonight, you mentioned it should not have occurred. The backup systems are designed with multiple redundancies. When I reached the utility room after the incident, I discovered something troubling." Magnus paused, his weathered hands working unconsciously. The manual override switch had been engaged, then returned to its normal position. Someone deliberately created a gap in the power restoration sequence. Poirot leaned forward with sharp interest. "You are certain this was intentional tampering?" "Absolutely certain. The switch position was unmistakable, and only 4 people possess access to that panel." His expression darkened slightly. Sir Alistair had been requesting modifications to the dome's lighting sequence recently, something about creating more dramatic reveals for guests. Dr. Korhonen opposed these changes, claiming they would interfere with her research instruments. And these modifications were implemented. A preliminary test was conducted 3 days ago. Annika supervised the technical adjustments. Magnus's voice carried a note of professional disapproval. "I advised against the modifications, but Sir Alistair insisted the aurora required proper theatrical presentation. Your relationship with Sir Alistair was strictly professional." Magnus hesitated, his weathered features revealing the first crack in diplomatic composure. He was demanding, often unreasonably so. He viewed this entire project as his personal stage, with little regard for safety protocols or staff welfare. We had disagreed several times about winter operating procedures. When Magnus departed, Tom March bounded in with characteristic American energy, though I noticed his usual confidence seemed slightly forced. He settled into the chair with casual familiarity, but his right hand remained carefully positioned, partially concealed within his jacket. "Terrible business, this," he announced with practiced sympathy. "Poor Alistair, though I suppose we all knew he was taking risks with this whole Arctic venture." "Risks, Monsieur March?" Poirot inquired, his attention drawn to the man's careful positioning. "Financial, primarily. The foundation was hemorrhaging money faster than he could pour it in. Several recent investments had underperformed badly, and this pavilion's operating costs were astronomical. Tom's laugh carried genuine amusement. He'd been seeking additional investors for months, growing increasingly desperate. Including yourself? God, no. I learned long ago never to invest in other people's dreams. Too much emotion, not enough profit analysis. Tom shifted slightly, and I caught a glimpse of scraped knuckles on his right hand. Though Alistair had been hinting about some revolutionary opportunity that would change everything. Poirot's keen eyes had also noticed the injury. You have injured your hand, monsieur. Slipped on the ice earlier today. These Norwegian winters are treacherous for those of us accustomed to more civilized climates. Tom's explanation came easily, perhaps too easily. After Tom's departure, Elspeth Grey swept in with theatrical precision, her sharp eyes immediately cataloguing the chamber's details with professional hunger. She settled into the chair with the satisfaction of one anticipating an excellent story. Monsieur Poirot, I must confess this situation possesses remarkable dramatic potential. The isolated setting, the aurora, the gathering of individuals each harboring secrets. You speak of secrets, madame. What secrets did Sir Alistair harbor? Several, I suspect. His marriage to Lady Viola was more business arrangement than romantic union. He needed her social connections. She required financial security. But there were whispers of other romantic entanglements, particularly regarding his devoted secretary. Elspeth's smile carried malicious satisfaction. Annika Sørensen's dedication extended well beyond professional duties, or so certain sources suggested. And you observed tensions tonight? Indeed. Lady Viola watched her husband's interaction with Annika throughout the evening with barely concealed resentment. When the lights failed, I was positioned near the dome controls and heard movement, urgent whispers, then that terrible sound of impact. As Elspeth departed with evident reluctance, Poirot turned to me with an expression of concentrated thought. The web grows more complex, mon ami. Technical sabotage, financial desperation, romantic complications, and a widow whose composure suggests either remarkable strength or careful preparation. Outside, the aurora continued its ancient dance, indifferent to the human drama unfolding beneath its ethereal light, while somewhere among our isolated company lurked a killer whose careful planning was beginning to reveal itself through Poirot's methodical investigation. Yves Dufour entered with the fluid grace of one accustomed to observing life through a lens, his camera equipment arranged with artistic precision. The French photographer possessed that particular quality of professional observers, simultaneously present and invisible, his keen eye trained to capture the moments others missed entirely. Monsieur Dufour, your profession grants you unique perspective on human behavior, Poirot began, settling back with evident appreciation for a fellow observer. What did your trained eye reveal tonight before the unfortunate darkness? Movement, Monsieur Poirot. Always I watch for the decisive moment, the gesture that reveals truth. Yves adjusted his camera strap with unconscious precision. Just before the dome opened, someone approached the emerald display case very closely. Close enough that their breath would fog the glass. I noticed the condensation bloom and fade, like a ghost's kiss upon the surface. Poirot's attention sharpened considerably. You observed this directly. Through my telephoto lens while positioning for the ceremony's climax, the warmth of human breath creates unmistakable patterns on cold glass. Someone leaned very near the verre de lait, though the lighting made identification impossible. Yves paused, his artistic eye catching details others missed. When the darkness came, I heard movement on the dais. Confident steps, not the hesitant shuffling of someone lost in blackness, someone who knew exactly where they were going. After Yves departed, Olga Markova entered with the regal bearing that decades of prima ballerina status had made second nature. Despite retirement, every movement remained carefully choreographed, her silver hair catching the aurora's shifting light with theatrical precision. Madame Markova, your artistic training provides sensitivity to movement and balance, Poirot observed with courtly respect. What did your dancer's instincts tell you about Sir Alister's fall? Bodies speak their own language, Monsieur Poirot. A natural fall creates specific sounds, specific rhythms. What I heard was wrong. Olga's theatrical training had honed her observational skills to razor sharpness. Sir Alister did not simply stumble. The impact suggested external force, a body meeting resistance it did not expect. When dancers fall accidentally, they try to recover. When they are pushed, they try to twist away. I heard that twist in his final moment. You were positioned where during the ceremony? Near Lady Viola, close enough to observe her reaction. When the lights failed, she did not immediately move toward her husband's voice. A wife's instinct drives her to reach for her beloved in darkness. Lady Viola hesitated, as if she expected something to happen. Olga's eyes glittered with performer's intuition. That hesitation spoke of foreknowledge or fear of discovery. As Olga departed, Dr. Koronen appeared in the doorway with Magnus beside her, both carrying expressions of grim discovery. The Finnish scientist held a tablet displaying technical data, while Magnus's weathered features showed professional concern. Monsieur Poirot, Dr. Koronen announced, we have examined the access logs for the electrical systems. The manual override that caused tonight's power failure was engaged using Annika Sørensen's security credentials, activated 6 minutes before the ceremony began. The revelation hung in the air like smoke from an extinguished candle. Magnus nodded grimly. The timestamp is unmistakable. Someone used Annika's access code to sabotage the backup power systems, creating the darkness that concealed Sir Alister's murder. That is impossible, came Annika's voice from behind them, her usual composure finally cracking. I was with Sir Alister and Lady Viola throughout the evening, reviewing the ceremony sequence. I never approached the utility room. The electronic record is quite clear, Dr. Koronen insisted, though her scientific precision seemed troubled by the human implications. Either you accessed the system yourself, or someone obtained your credentials through other means. Poirot raised his hand, and the mounting tension subsided like a held breath released. Logs may be altered, credentials may be borrowed or stolen. Technology serves truth, but does not always reveal it immediately. His pale eyes moved thoughtfully between the assembled faces. We must examine not merely what the machines tell us, but what human nature whispers beneath their mechanical certainty. Yet the atmosphere had shifted dramatically. The first clear evidence of deliberate sabotage had emerged, pointing directly at Sir Alister's devoted secretary. Too convenient, too obvious. Exactly the kind of misdirection that made Poirot's mustache twitch with professional skepticism. Hastings, he murmured as the others dispersed, observe how quickly suspicion crystallizes around the most vulnerable target. The true killer relies upon our eagerness to accept simple solutions to complex problems. The aurora pulsed overhead with ethereal indifference, while somewhere among their isolated company, a murderer watched their carefully constructed plan begin to unfold exactly as intended. The revelation of Annika's compromised credentials had shifted the pavilion's atmosphere like a sudden change in barometric pressure. I observed the other guests watching her with that particular fascination reserved for public downfalls, while Annika herself stood rigid beneath the emergency lighting, her professional composure finally showing the hairline fractures that betrayed her mounting desperation. Before we accept the testimony of machines, Poirot announced with characteristic precision, we must examine what human hands have touched. Magnus, you will show me this utility room, s'il vous plaît. We followed the lodge manager through a service corridor lined with brushed steel, the faint scent of ozone and electrical components growing stronger as we approached the mechanical heart of the pavilion. Magnus unlocked a heavy door, revealing a narrow chamber dense with labeled circuits and industrial switches. The manual override lever sat beneath a protective sheath, now flipped upward in mute testimony to recent tampering. This lever was engaged, then returned to its normal position, Magnus explained, his weathered finger hovering without touching the mechanism. The timing corresponds exactly with the access log entries. Poirot descended into his characteristic examination pose, his keen eyes studying the switch assembly with the attention of a jeweler appraising precious stones. Observe, Hastings. The handle bears a faint residue, perhaps from gloves or nervous perspiration, and here, upon the protective sheath, a small but telling detail. I leaned closer and saw what his trained eye had detected, a faint smear of violet ink, barely visible against the industrial grey metal. Violet ink, Magnus observed. Miss Sørenson's preferred colour for her notes. Indeed. Yet ink may travel by many routes to reach its destination. Poirot straightened, his expression thoughtful. The evidence accumulates with suspicious convenience, no? As we prepared to leave, Magnus paused at the corridor's entrance, then bent to retrieve something from the floor. Wrapped carefully in his handkerchief, he presented a lady's glove, elegant and expensive, with the initials A.S. embroidered discreetly at the cuff. This was not here earlier, Magnus stated with professional certainty. Someone has placed it deliberately. The implications hung in the Arctic air like visible breath as we returned to the main pavilion, where Annika awaited with the resignation of one who recognizes the walls closing in around her. Mademoiselle Sørensen, Poirot said gently, settling into his chair with deliberate composure, perhaps you would clarify your movements during the crucial period before the ceremony. The request broke through her remaining defenses like ice cracking under spring warmth. I was with Sir Alistair and Lady Viola in the preparation area, reviewing his speech, she began, her voice trembling with suppressed emotion, but I had to leave briefly to retrieve some notes from his private study in the lodge below. And this absence troubled you? More than you can imagine. Her professional mask finally shattered completely, revealing raw vulnerability beneath. Sir Alistair was planning to dismiss me, Monsieur Poirot. After 5 years of devoted service, he intended to replace me with someone more accommodating to Lady Viola's preferences. The confession of motive seemed to seal her fate, yet something in Poirot's expression suggested he found the revelation less damning than illuminating. The timing of this absence interests me greatly, he continued with characteristic persistence. Can you be precise about when you left and returned? Before Annika could respond, Reverend Vale stepped forward with clerical authority. I believe I can provide that precision, Monsieur Poirot. I was in the main lounge when Miss Sørensen passed through, heading toward the lodge. I noted the time specifically, 2007, as I was expecting Captain Lansing for a discussion about local history. And her return. Approximately 2010. She appeared quite flustered, muttering about Sir Alistair's demanding nature. Poirot's eyes lit with the particular satisfaction that accompanied the alignment of crucial facts. 2007 to 2010, 3 minutes precisely. He turned to address the assembled company. The ceremony began at 2015. The utility room lies 30 seconds from this pavilion. Sir Alistair's study requires a 2-minute walk each direction through the connecting passage. The mathematical impossibility struck the gathering like a physical blow. 4 minutes of travel time compressed into 3 minutes of absence, with no opportunity for the elaborate sabotage the electronic records suggested. Someone used your credentials, mademoiselle, Poirot observed with gentle certainty, but that someone was not you. The relief that flooded Annika's features was immediately replaced by a new tension that spread through the group like ripples in disturbed water. If not the obvious suspect, then who among them possessed both the technical knowledge and the calculated malice to orchestrate such an elaborate deception? Dr. Coronen's scientific precision reasserted itself with visible effort. The access logs cannot lie, but they can be manipulated by someone with sufficient expertise. The question becomes who among us possesses such capabilities. And who had access to Mademoiselle Sorensen's security credentials? Poirot added thoughtfully. The answer to both questions may well be the same individual. Tom March shifted uncomfortably, his usual American confidence somewhat diminished by the evening's revelations. Lady Viola's composure had returned, but her dark eyes held a new wariness that spoke of secrets carefully guarded. Even Magnus appeared troubled by implications that extended beyond his professional responsibilities. Outside, the aurora continued its ancient dance with ethereal indifference, while somewhere among our isolated company, a killer watched their carefully orchestrated plan adapt to Poirot's methodical dismantling of their elaborate misdirection. "Hastings," Poirot murmured as the tension settled like Arctic frost around us. "Observe how the obvious clue becomes the most dangerous path when it has been swept clean by those who wish us to take it. Our murderer possesses both technical sophistication and psychological cunning, a combination that makes them formidable indeed." The shadows beneath the northern lights had revealed their first deception, but I sensed that deeper darkness still awaited Poirot's legendary powers of illumination. The exoneration of Agatha Sorensen had shifted the investigation's center of gravity, and I observed Poirot processing this development with the methodical precision of a master clockmaker adjusting delicate mechanisms. The planted evidence suggested a killer who understood both human psychology and technical systems, someone capable of orchestrating elaborate deceptions while maintaining the appearance of innocence among our isolated company. "The murderer has revealed more of their hand than intended," Poirot murmured, his pale eyes moving thoughtfully across the assembled faces. "They possessed technical expertise, access to security credentials, and most importantly, the psychological sophistication to create false trails. Yet in their cleverness, they have also revealed the scope of their planning." His attention turned toward the shrouded emerald display, and with characteristic precision, he approached the case that had drawn so much attention throughout the evening. "Magnus, you will open the Verdelet display once more, s'il vous plaît. Slowly, with the greatest care." Magnus produced the necessary keys, the combination of electronic and mechanical security that seemed emblematic of Sir Alister's vision. As the seal released with a faint mechanical sigh, Poirot leaned closer, his trained eye following the precise arrangement of the emeralds, the way the chain had been draped, the exact positioning of each element. "Observe, Hastings," he said quietly, his attention focused on the case's interior mechanism. Here, caught upon the hinge, a single thread of fabric. Dark wool, expensive quality, recently deposited. His keen eye noted the thread's position without disturbing it. Someone examined these emeralds very closely indeed, close enough to leave this small testimony of their interest. Dr. Coronin stepped forward with scientific curiosity, though her expression carried undertones of professional anxiety. "Monsieur Poirot, there is something else you should understand about tonight's events. Sir Alister had been pressuring me regarding my aurora prediction research, specifically a proprietary algorithm I developed for forecasting geomagnetic activity with unprecedented accuracy." Tom March shifted uncomfortably, his scraped knuckles whitening as he clenched his fists. "Alister approached me about investing in that very technology. Said it would revolutionize everything from tourism to satellite communications, worth billions in commercial applications." "And your response, Monsieur March?" "I told him I needed proof, a demonstration of the algorithm's capabilities. He promised to show me something spectacular tonight after the ceremony." Tom's laugh carried nervous energy. "Said it would change my entire perspective on atmospheric science." Poirot's attention sharpened considerably. A demonstration that never occurred, following Sir Alister's untimely death. Most convenient for someone who perhaps disagreed with his commercial ambitions. Dr. Coronin's scientific composure cracked slightly. He was attempting to commercialize my work without proper safeguards, without consideration for research integrity. We had a rather heated disagreement about it this very afternoon. He saw only profit potential, not scientific responsibility. As this revelation settled among the group, Magnus appeared with additional information that would further complicate our understanding. Monsieur Poirot, I have reviewed the lodge's internal security recordings. Approximately 10 minutes before the ceremony, someone entered Sir Alistair's private study using administrative access credentials, remaining inside for less than a minute before departing. And this individual. The footage shows Reverend Vale, though he appears to be searching for something specific rather than conducting casual observation. A collective intake of breath greeted this announcement. Reverend Vale, who had maintained clerical dignity throughout the evening's proceedings, now appeared genuinely startled by the revelation. I was seeking a moment of quiet reflection before the ceremony, he explained with measured calm, though his usual composure showed hairline fractures. Sir Alistair had granted me access to his study for that purpose earlier today, when I mentioned my need for spiritual preparation. Yet you did not mention this visit during our earlier conversation. Poirot observed with characteristic gentleness that nonetheless carried unmistakable authority. The atmosphere in the pavilion had transformed once again, suspicion flowing like Arctic wind from one individual to another. Financial motives, scientific disputes, clandestine searches, and carefully planted evidence created a web of deception that seemed to implicate nearly everyone present. Hastings, Poirot murmured as the tension settled around us like visible frost. Observe how each revelation uncovers deeper layers of human complexity. Our killer has scattered many small truths to obscure one large deception, but truth has its own gravity. Eventually, all deceptions must orbit around it. The shadows beneath the northern lights had revealed another intricate layer of motive and opportunity. Yet I sensed that the heart of this deadly performance still awaited Poirot's legendary powers of illumination. The mounting revelations had transformed our understanding of Sir Alistair Rendell from philanthropic industrialist to a man who collected secrets and enemies with equal fervor. Poirot stood before the aurora-lit windows, his keen mind processing each new thread in the increasingly complex web of motives and opportunities that surrounded our isolated company. Reverend Vale, Poirot continued with characteristic gentleness, your visit to Sir Alistair's study was brief but purposeful. What precisely were you seeking among his private papers? The clergyman's composure finally cracked, revealing the human anxiety beneath his spiritual authority. Letters, Monsieur Poirot, correspondence from my late sister, who had a brief but regrettable association with Sir Alistair years ago. He had promised to return them, but used their existence as leverage whenever our paths crossed professionally. Blackmail. Elspeth Gray's journalistic instinct seized upon the implication with predatory satisfaction. Not blackmail in the conventional sense, Reverend Vale replied with evident pain. But Sir Alistair enjoyed the power that holding those letters provided. He knew they could compromise both my standing and my sister's memory. Tom March's nervous laugh carried bitter recognition. Alistair had a talent for collecting people's weaknesses like other men collect stamps. He used information as currency, always maintaining a careful ledger of human frailties. Poirot's attention sharpened considerably. And you, Monsieur March, your injured hand suggests more than a simple slip upon ice. The pattern of abrasions indicates contact with something more substantial than frozen ground. Tom's bravado finally crumbled completely. We had a disagreement this afternoon about some investments. Things became heated, and I may have struck him. Nothing serious, just a moment of lost temper when he threatened to expose certain financial irregularities in my business dealings. The pattern was becoming clear. Sir Alistair had surrounded himself with individuals over whom he held various forms of leverage, creating a circle of potential enemies bound to him by mutual dependence and resentment. The web grows more intricate, Poirot observed, moving toward the shrouded emerald display with deliberate purpose. Yet I suspect we have not yet reached its center. Magnus, you will examine the verdelais once more, paying particular attention to the clasp mechanism. As Magnus carefully opened the case, Poirot beckoned to Yves Dufour. "Monsieur, your photographs from the ceremony's beginning. You captured the moment of the emerald's initial reveal." Yves produced his camera with professional efficiency, scrolling to the requested image. The photograph showed the verdelet in blazing detail, each emerald catching the pavilion's lights like captured starfire. Most importantly, the clasp bore an intricate starburst pattern etched into its gold surface. "Now," Poirot said quietly, directing our attention to the emeralds currently displayed in the case, "observe the clasp before us." The difference was immediately apparent. Where the photograph showed elaborate engraving, the physical clasp bore only a simple, unadorned cartouche. "Mon Dieu," Dr. Corhonen breathed, her scientific training grasping the implications instantly. "The emeralds have been switched. Someone substituted a counterfeit during the confusion." Lady Viola's face had gone ashen, though whether from shock or recognition, I could not determine. "That's impossible," she whispered. "The verdelet has been in my family for generations. I would know immediately if it were a forgery." "Would you, madame?" Poirot inquired with gentle precision. A skilled craftsman, working from detailed photographs and measurements, could create a replica that would fool casual observation. Only close examination would reveal the deception. At that moment, Captain Lansing appeared in the pavilion's entrance, snow dusting his uniform and his expression carrying the weight of disturbing news. "Monsieur Poirot, I have managed brief radio contact with the authorities in Tromsø. They cannot reach us until the storm passes, but they have provided crucial information about Sir Alistair's situation." "Proceed, Captain." "Sir, Alistair Rendell was under active investigation by the Financial Conduct Authority for securities fraud. His foundation's assets were largely fictitious, built upon a pyramid of false investments and misappropriated funds. Criminal charges were imminent. He faced complete financial ruin and probable imprisonment. The revelation struck our company like a physical blow. Annika Sørensen's professional loyalty finally yielded to personal honesty. He had been selling foundation assets secretly, using my administrative access to cover the transactions. When I discovered the discrepancies last week and confronted him, he threatened to frame me for the theft. That's why he planned to dismiss me. I knew too much about his illegal activities." "The Verdelet donation was not generosity, madame," Poirot observed, addressing Lady Viola with characteristic understanding, "but necessity. Your husband required assets that could not be easily traced or seized by authorities." Lady Viola's composure finally shattered completely. He never told me about the investigation, but I suspected something was terribly wrong. The pressure, the secrecy, the way he looked at the emeralds, not with appreciation, but with desperation. As these revelations settled among the group, Magnus made another disturbing discovery. "Monsieur Poirot, there is a small electronic device embedded within the display case's locking mechanism. A transmitter of some kind, recently installed and still active." Dr. Coronen's scientific expertise immediately grasped the implications. Such a device could coordinate multiple electronic systems, creating synchronized failures across different circuits. Someone with sufficient technical knowledge could orchestrate the entire evening's sequence of events remotely, including the power failure that concealed both murder and theft, Poirot concluded with satisfaction. "Our killer possesses not merely motive and opportunity, but the technical sophistication to orchestrate an elaborate deception spanning months of careful preparation." The shadows beneath the northern lights had revealed their most complex lair yet, a crime that combined murder, theft, and financial desperation into a single, meticulously planned performance. Yet I sensed that Poirot's legendary powers of deduction were finally approaching the heart of this deadly puzzle. "Hastings," he murmured as the aurora pulsed overhead with ethereal indifference, "observe how the killer has woven together multiple crimes, believing that complexity would obscure their true purpose. But the little gray cells, they prefer order to chaos, and soon all will be revealed in its proper sequence. Somewhere among our isolated company, a murderer watched their elaborate scheme begin to unravel under the weight of Poirot's methodical investigation, knowing that the final confrontation was drawing inexorably closer. The revelation of the sophisticated transmitter had elevated the investigation beyond simple murder into the realm of elaborate conspiracy, and I observed Poirot processing these developments with a methodical precision that had made his reputation legendary. His pale eyes moved thoughtfully between the compromised display case and the assembled suspects, each revelation adding another thread to the increasingly complex web of deception surrounding Sir Alister's death. "The device confirms what I have long suspected," Poirot announced, his accented English carrying quiet authority. "This crime required months of careful preparation, intimate knowledge of the pavilion's systems, and access to information that only someone within Sir Alister's inner circle could possess." Lady Viola stepped forward with evident reluctance, her composure finally yielding to the weight of accumulated secrets. "Monsieur Poirot, there is something about my husband's condition that may be relevant to your investigation. His recent medical examination revealed a previously undiagnosed heart condition, something that made him extremely vulnerable to sudden shock or physical trauma. The medical revelation struck our company with immediate significance. Dr. Coronen's scientific training allowed her to grasp the implications instantly. A person with such knowledge could orchestrate a death that would appear accidental, using the victim's own physical vulnerability as the weapon. "Precisely, madame," Poirot agreed, his attention sharpening considerably. "Someone who knew of Sir Alister's condition could engineer circumstances that would prove fatal without requiring obvious violence." As this information settled among the group, Yves Dufour approached with photographic evidence that would prove crucial to understanding the evening's true sequence. "Monsieur Poirot, I have been reviewing all images captured tonight, including several taken during the power restoration sequence." The photographs he presented revealed movements and positions that contradicted earlier statements. Most significantly, one image clearly showed a figure at the emerald display case during the brief moment when emergency lighting flickered to life, their posture suggesting confident familiarity with the mechanism's operation. "The individual works with practiced efficiency," Poirot observed, studying the image with characteristic intensity. "This is not someone fumbling in darkness, but rather someone executing a rehearsed sequence of actions." Magnus appeared with another disturbing discovery from Sir Alister's private study. "I found these hidden behind other documents," he announced, presenting architectural plans of the pavilion marked with precise annotations in multiple handwritings. The notations span several months and include detailed security protocols, electrical routing, and camera blind spots. The implications were immediately clear. This level of preparation indicated conspiracy rather than individual action, collaborative planning that extended far beyond the evening's tragic events. Poirot examined the plans with growing satisfaction, his trained eye recognizing the significance of each marking. "Observe, Hastings, how the annotations focus particularly on the emerald display area and the electrical systems. Someone has been planning tonight's performance with theatrical precision." Moving with characteristic purpose, Poirot approached Sir Alister's private study, where the fireplace glowed with carefully banked embers. His keen eye was drawn to something within the ash, and with delicate precision, he retrieved a small, partially melted fragment wrapped carefully in his handkerchief. "Gold," he announced quietly, revealing a piece of jewelry bearing the distinctive starburst pattern that should have adorned the authentic Verdeles clasp. "Someone has attempted to destroy evidence of the switch, but fire, she is an imperfect accomplice to crime." The burned fragment provided the final piece of physical evidence linking the emerald theft to the murder, confirming that both crimes had been orchestrated by the same individual with access to Sir Alister's private quarters. "Ladies and gentlemen," Poirot announced, his voice carrying the particular authority that indicated his legendary powers of deduction were approaching their synthesis. We now possess sufficient evidence to understand both the method and the motive behind tonight's elaborate performance. He gestured toward the great glass dome where the aurora continued its ancient dance with ethereal indifference. Our killer has woven together murder, theft, and technical sabotage into a single, meticulously planned crime. They believed that complexity would obscure truth, that multiple false leads would create an impenetrable maze of deception. The atmosphere in the pavilion had transformed into electric anticipation, each guest recognizing that Poirot's methodical investigation was finally approaching its climactic revelation. "But the little gray cells," he continued with quiet confidence, "they prefer order to chaos. Soon, all will be revealed in its proper sequence, and the shadows beneath the northern lights will yield their darkest secret." Somewhere among our isolated company, a killer watched their elaborate scheme begin its final unraveling under the weight of Poirot's relentless logic. The moment had arrived when Poirot would orchestrate the psychological pressure that would expose the killer among our isolated company. He positioned himself before the great windows where the aurora painted its ethereal patterns across the Arctic sky, his small, precise figure commanding absolute attention as the emergency lighting cast dramatic shadows across the pavilion's interior. "We shall conduct a small experiment," Poirot announced with characteristic precision, his accented English carrying quiet authority. "Each of you will return to your exact position during the ceremony. Dr. Corhonen will simulate the dome opening sequence, and Magnus will recreate the lighting conditions that preceded Sir Alistair's death." The reconstruction that followed revealed more than any formal interrogation could have achieved. As the lights flickered and dimmed, I observed the involuntary reactions that betrayed hidden knowledge. The confident movement of someone who knew exactly what would happen, the positioning of hands that suggested preparation rather than surprise, the controlled breathing that spoke of rehearsed action rather than genuine shock. When the lights returned to their dim steadiness, Poirot's keen eyes had catalogued each revealing gesture. Lady Viola's hand gripped her clutch with unnecessary force. Tom March's injured hand had moved instinctively toward his inner pocket. Most tellingly, someone had shifted position with the fluid confidence of one executing a familiar sequence, their movement betraying intimate knowledge of the pavilion's layout in darkness. "Merci," Poirot murmured with satisfaction. "The human instinct, she cannot lie when properly observed." At that moment, the acrid scent of smoke began to filter through the pavilion's ventilation system. Magnus spun toward the corridor, and we followed him through the service passage where grey tendrils crept along the ceiling like accusatory fingers. The door to Sir Alistair's private study stood ajar, heat breathing from the fireplace with the greed of recently fed flames. Magnus seized the fire extinguisher and smothered the blaze with professional efficiency, but not before crucial evidence had been partially destroyed. Poirot stepped through the settling ash with characteristic precision, his patent leather shoes immaculate even in the chaos. With delicate movements, he retrieved fragments that told their own story, a blistered remnant of sophisticated circuitry, its melted casing speaking to deliberate destruction of electronic evidence. "The accomplice most faithful to a murderer," Poirot observed quietly, wrapping the burned transmitter in his handkerchief, "is the fire that destroys what remains when nerve fails and time grows short." More damning still was his discovery of Sir Alistair's monogrammed letter opener, its silver blade blackened by flame, its handle bearing the unmistakable smudge of violet ink. The same distinctive color that Annika Sørensen used for her meticulous notes. Someone has attempted to eliminate the evidence of their careful planning. Poirot continued, his pale eyes noting every reaction among our assembled company. "Yet fire, she is an imperfect accomplice to crime." Magnus appeared with one final revelation that would complete the picture of premeditated murder. In his weathered hands, he carried a sophisticated electronic device discovered hidden within the lodge's communication equipment. "A signal jamming device," he announced grimly, "designed to prevent outside contact during specific time periods. The timing corresponds. exactly with tonight's ceremony. The implications struck our company with devastating clarity. Someone had not merely orchestrated murder and theft, but had ensured our complete isolation to prevent interference with their carefully planned escape. This level of technical sophistication and advanced preparation spoke to months of meticulous planning by someone with intimate access to Sir Alistair's affairs. "Ladies and gentlemen," Poirot announced, his voice carrying the particular authority that indicated his legendary powers of deduction had reached their synthesis. "We now possess sufficient evidence to understand both the method and the identity of our killer. Someone among us has woven together murder, theft, and technical sabotage into what they believed would be the perfect crime." His attention moved methodically across each face, noting the subtle shifts in posture that betrayed mounting anxiety. They understood that respectability often provides the perfect camouflage for criminal enterprise. Who would suspect someone whose professional standing depends upon public trust? The aurora continued its ancient dance overhead with ethereal indifference, while somewhere among our isolated company, a murderer recognized that their elaborate deception was finally approaching its inevitable exposure under the weight of Poirot's relentless logic. "Tomorrow, when the storm passes and the aurora grows pale," Poirot concluded with quiet satisfaction, "we shall assemble here for the final revelation. The shadows beneath the northern lights will yield their darkest secret, and justice will illuminate the human darkness that has claimed Sir Alistair Rendell's life." The time for psychological games had ended. The final confrontation awaited with the dawn. The pale Arctic dawn filtered through the pavilion's great dome with crystalline clarity, transforming the scene of last night's tragedy into something almost ethereal. The storm had finally exhausted itself against the Norwegian peaks, leaving behind a landscape of pristine snow that sparkled beneath the emerging sun. The aurora's ghostly dance had faded to memory, but its shadows had revealed secrets that would endure far longer than its celestial beauty. Poirot stood before our assembled company with characteristic precision, his immaculate appearance unchanged despite the night's revelations. His pale eyes held that familiar spark of intellectual satisfaction, though tempered by the gravity of the circumstances that had brought us to this moment of truth. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his accented English carrying quiet authority, "we have spent these hours examining the shadows beneath the northern lights, and now the time has come to illuminate the human darkness that orchestrated Sir Alistair Rendell's death." He moved with deliberate grace toward the shrouded emerald display, his trained eye noting the subtle tensions that betrayed hidden anxiety among our company. This crime possessed multiple layers of deception: murder disguised as accident, theft concealed by misdirection, and an elaborate web of false evidence designed to entrap the innocent. Our killer believed that complexity would obscure truth, but the little gray cells prefer order to chaos. With methodical precision, Poirot began to dismantle the carefully constructed deception. "Let us first eliminate those who, despite compelling motives, lacked either the means or the opportunity to orchestrate such an elaborate performance." His attention turned briefly to each suspect in turn. "Reverend Vale, your search for compromising letters made you furtive, but not murderous. Tom March, your violent temper left marks upon your hands, but violence born of passion differs greatly from premeditated murder. Lady Viola, your financial desperation provided motive, but not the technical expertise required. Annika Sørensen, the electronic evidence accused you falsely. Time and distance proved your innocence beyond doubt." Poirot's gaze settled upon Dr. Lena Koronen, whose scientific composure had grown increasingly strained as the investigation progressed. "Doctor, your expertise in atmospheric physics made you invaluable to Sir Alistair's vision. Yet that same knowledge became the foundation for an elaborate revenge that combined scientific precision with calculated murder." Dr. Korhonen's face had gone ashen, but her scientific training maintained her composure even as the walls of deception crumbled around her. I don't understand what you're suggesting, Monsieur Poirot. Then allow me to illuminate the sequence of events with the same methodical precision you applied to your atmospheric research. Poirot continued relentlessly. You discovered that Sir Alistair intended to commercialize your Aurora prediction algorithm, transforming years of legitimate research into a profit-driven enterprise. When he threatened to claim credit for your life's work, you realized that your scientific legacy would be stolen as surely as any physical treasure. He gestured toward the evidence that had accumulated throughout the investigation. The transmitter embedded within the display case, programmed with your expertise. The jamming device that ensured our isolation, installed with your technical knowledge. The precise coordination of power failure and dome opening, timed with the accuracy of your atmospheric predictions, all bore the hallmarks of scientific methodology applied to criminal purpose. Dr. Corhonen's scientific detachment began to crack under the weight of Poirot's methodical revelation. He was going to destroy everything I'd worked for, reduce genuine research to a tourist attraction. But murder was always your intention, Poirot observed with devastating precision. You accessed Sir Alistair's medical records through your position in the Foundation, discovering his previously undiagnosed heart condition. You realized that this weakness could serve as your weapon, a means of killing that would appear natural under the right circumstances. The psychological pressure of Poirot's revelation was beginning to shatter even Dr. Corhonen's scientific composure. You planned every detail with the same meticulous care you applied to your research. You studied the pavilion's systems for months, learning to manipulate the electrical infrastructure. You stole Annika's security credentials, knowing that suspicion would naturally fall upon the secretary with clear motive for revenge. You planted her glove, used her distinctive violet ink, created a trail of false evidence designed to protect yourself while destroying an innocent woman. With devastating logic, Poirot reconstructed the crime's execution. During those crucial moments of darkness, you moved with the confidence of one who had rehearsed every step. You approached Sir Alistair at the moment of maximum vulnerability, when his heart condition made him susceptible to shock. You revealed your identity, your betrayal, your theft of his wife's emeralds. The psychological trauma, combined with physical confrontation, proved too much for his weakened heart. Dr. Corhonen's scientific facade finally shattered completely. He deserved what happened to him. He was going to steal my life's work, claim credit for discoveries that could revolutionize atmospheric science. I couldn't allow legitimate research to be perverted into commercial entertainment. Yet, in your righteous anger, Poirot observed with gentle reproach, you became the very thing you despised, someone who stole what belonged to another. The emeralds were Lady Viola's inheritance, not yours to take in service of even the most noble cause. The confession that followed revealed the full scope of Dr. Corhonen's elaborate planning. She had spent months studying the pavilion's systems, creating the sophisticated transmitter that would coordinate the evening's deadly performance. The theft of Annika's credentials, the installation of the jamming device, the preparation of false evidence. All had been orchestrated with scientific thoroughness. When the darkness came, Poirot concluded, you executed your plan with the precision of a laboratory experiment. Sir Alistair's weak heart could not withstand the combined shock of betrayal and confrontation. You completed the theft of the emeralds, activated the devices that would destroy evidence, and watched as suspicion fell exactly where you had directed it. As the authorities finally arrived with the clearing storm, Dr. Corhonen was taken into custody with the dignity that befitted her scientific achievements, even as they were forever tainted by the crime that had claimed Sir Alistair's life. The authentic Verdelais emeralds were recovered from her quarters, where she had hidden them pending her planned escape. Standing beneath the great dome as our company prepared to depart, Poirot offered his characteristic reflection on human nature. The aurora borealis reminds us that even the most beautiful phenomena arise from violent cosmic collisions. So, too, with human ambition, the collision between noble purpose and ignoble method often produces the most tragic results. He adjusted his immaculate cuffs with characteristic precision. Dr. Korhonen possessed one of the finest scientific minds of her generation, yet she allowed pride and anger to corrupt her genius into an instrument of death. The little gray cells, they tell us that intelligence without wisdom, knowledge without conscience, becomes the most dangerous force of all. The shadows beneath the northern lights had finally yielded their darkest secret, and justice had illuminated the human darkness that had claimed Sir Alistair Rendell's life. As we departed that crystalline Arctic morning, I found myself reflecting on the thin line between righteous anger and criminal action, and how even the most brilliant minds can lose their way when passion overrules principle. The aurora would continue its ancient dance above the Norwegian peaks, indifferent to human ambition and folly, while Hercule Poirot's methodical brilliance had once again proven that no deception, however elaborate, could withstand the patient application of logic and the relentless pursuit of truth. "Come, Hastings," Poirot murmured as we walked toward the waiting aircraft, his breath visible in the crisp Arctic air. "The little gray cells have earned their rest. In the end, it is not the complexity of the crime that matters, but the simplicity of truth that always, inevitably prevails."